on Discord and others. Here, can you all hear me on Discord? Discord. Let me know if you can hear me. Hello. Craig will be
Oh, what was that last part?
I was telling everyone that you'll be going in just a moment once we're live.
Right.
Careers, contra, entrepreneurship, and fundraising. Beautiful. All right, cool. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna spell that wrong. Fine. All right, cool. Let me just again make sure that the one that's always slow is good. Neil, you're here to ask questions. That's what's good. Because Craig is an amazing mentor for you. All right, good. Yeah, we're live. All right, perfect. Craig, now that we got all systems go, please introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Craig Silverstein. I am a consultant turned founder, actually founder turned consultant turned founder again. And I've been through mergers and acquisitions. I've seen battlefields. I've seen battlefields of the tech industry, and have ramped up. Typically started in the entertainment software space. I hopped onto a company I was consulting with called SyncSketch, which does collaborative visual reviews. I led the acquisition for them by Unity Technologies and was in Unity for a long time, just looking at their business operations, their acquisitions, kind of figuring out the strategic moves there. And when I was going to go back into consulting after the Unity acquisition, I was thinking, you know what? The way AI has transformed what consulting does, what can I do to take things a step further and not only be a consulting agency, which is kind of now much less a consulting agency and more of a tech industry. I developed a product called Minerva Engine, which is an intelligence engine that really looks at analyzing companies, the markets, and kind of creating like a 3D model of what a company looks like operating inside of the current ecosystem that exists out in the real world. So that's a little bit about what I do, where I've been, what I'm developing. And yeah, I've started out in my very early days building global teams for a post-production company called Deluxe. And that's kind of what got me into business to begin with. So I know a lot of founders are tech heavy. I'm starting to get more tech heavy since I can learn things super fast with the way AI has kind of helped people who kind of typically start out not necessarily the DevOps realm and more the business realm. So I'm one of those kind of treading the line of tech versus business operations and strategy at more of like that executive CEO level. So that's about me.
I love it, Craig. Always a wide range of different experiences to pull from. While we wait for some questions and everyone joining, yeah, I hang on one second. Some people are only getting my audio for some reason on Discord, but I was just checking on Discord and the feed when I made sure to unmute it, it was working fine. So perhaps, yeah, hang on. All right. Okay. Mute this mic. Make sure again the start Mata feed.
My good mic is actually not plugged in.
No,
Let
you're
me
good.
change. Hold on one.
Okay. So that said, while we're waiting for some people to post questions, those that are watching, use the text chat, write out your questions, send them over. I will take them, copy them over to Craig. We'll read them together and then get you some answers, insights, feedback, and do what we can to help you. And if you don't know what to ask, you can always share what you're working on, challenged by, what you might be anxious about, because that too is a wonderful starting point to help everyone realize that we're all human beings, we're all facing the same problems, and the anxiety of building a career or business is a common factor we all share. So we can definitely find ways to help you if you don't know what to ask. And those of us over on Startmata, Gabriel, welcome. Feel free to, yeah, you can come up on stage if you'd like to. Feel free to raise your hand or let me know in the text chat that you want to come up and speak directly using your microphone to Craig. You can also use your camera. And with that said, while we wait for questions to come in, because people are shy, Craig, we've done a bunch of events together. We just did a big event with another friend, Brian Rabinovitz, that was very much an expo floor. I'm curious, how did you make the most of those connections with people that were coming up to your table or people that you managed to find and, kind of meet walking around, whether that was like, making a restroom break and coming across people on the way or scouring around and doing some like, adventuring along, the rest of the floor. How did you make the most of that to build relationships and work towards authentically supporting your business without being purely transactional? Because a lot of people are very, very short term thinking in regards to what they do with their energy and time when they're in a position like that.
Yeah. Well, first, can you hear me okay? I switched my mic.
Yeah, you're
Um,
fine. Yeah, again, I,
okay,
I
great.
I think it was a user issue with
Yeah.
Discord people. Yeah, everyone else is good.
No worries. Yeah. So events and conferences and mixers and all that stuff is I'm an extrovert by nature. So I tend to flock towards those events. And one of the things that I love is learning about people, their problems, what they do, especially if they are not necessarily just a client fit for my particular services or anything, but also if there are things that I can just learn from them that will help me better understand different audiences that are out there. Because when you learn about someone and socialize with someone, the best thing you can possibly do is make it about them. I know a lot of people say that, and it's very actually hard to do in practice because for everybody, we're the center of the world, center of the universe, just because we all have our own perspective. That's basically ground zero for us. So I think the big thing is being able to step away from that natural instinct where it's all about you, what you want, and what you want to learn. Not that you want to ignore what you want to learn, but the best thing to do is when you're starting conversations, figure out what is this person passionate about and ask questions that draw that out of someone. The best way to establish a very strong connection initially is not necessarily to get somebody excited about what you're doing. It's actually to be excited about what they are doing. And that's how you create a really strong connection first. So I'm always looking for what are these people passionate about? I do think about, okay, how does what they're passionate about tie into what I do? Typically, I go to events where that's pretty easy. Any event that has founders, investors, tech companies, and I'd say even a little less founders right now because my product's mainly for mid market, large enterprise kind of levels. Um, but my roots are in startups and I understand the investment dynamic, the risk dynamic that all investors have, thinking about the different levers that are important to them. And that really helps me across the board with what I build, how I interact with people. So I'd say, in short, step one, make it about them, find out what they're passionate about, and get excited about what they believe in to find the common ground of, okay, let's focus on these areas in the conversation that this person's clearly passionate about. That will drive kind of momentum forward. So for a lot of people that I met at the event that we were at, if they were working in the talent space, how do we land really solid executives that are going to empower companies that we're placing if they're an executive placement firm, or if a company is typically looking at portfolio expansion for what they're doing, I might ask them about, hey, I'm not going to like shove my product in their face even for a while. I'm going to ask, what are the biggest problems when you buy a company out and you're expanding into a new region, or looking to merge two products together to better empower your market? Like those are the types of questions where if you start asking about problems, then you could come back with a story that reconfirms what their problem is and that it's a real thing and that you understand exactly what it is. So one example that I frequently use is somebody's merging products in a market. You look at Okta and Auth0. It was a cataclysmic catastrophe that happened when Okta bought Auth0, which is one's used for security for enterprise apps. You may, if you work at a large company, you'll have different tiles of all your apps that you log in for single sign-on. And then there's Auth0 that actually builds multi-factor authentication and stuff into products. Two different products, two different markets, both have to do with app security. So they just bought them. Tons of issues with selling, all that stuff. That type of stuff, somebody like if you tell someone that's going through a similar situation with a merger or acquisition, boom, you're in. Like they understand it, they get it, and they understand that you understand what they're doing, and that's really important. So that's what I go there is first tap into those conversations and then find enough common ground to continue the conversation after the mixer. At a mixer or event or conference, you really don't want to be talking to one person the whole time because it's going to limit the amount of exposure that you have. And there might be a really valuable contact that you miss. So a lot of people are going to be going super fast to different people, make conversation short, and they're going to have a little switch in their head. Is this person worth another conversation or no? And that's a very similar thing that investors will ask in a meeting with a startup founder. Is this person worth another minute or two of my time or no? And that's typically what will either move the needle forward or kind of have things stall out where they are. So your main goal is to get the person excited about what they do, not about what you do. Then once they feel that common ground and you think that there's commonality enough where they would be a good network connection, think about that and think about extending the conversation beyond uh, beyond that particular one introduction or meeting. And of course, if it comes up, the person asks, what do you do? What are you working on? What product is this that you have on your table that is really cool or really confusing or whatever? Absorb that feedback that people have. Their first impressions are what every single user or customer or someone that hears about your product might have going through their head. So absorb it. And that's when you make your move on explaining things. And my best advice is to have that elevator pitch. 3 to 5 seconds, somebody should understand what you do. And you'll notice that if you lead your elevator pitch with the problem that a person can understand, your pitch will end up hitting a lot stronger than if you just start explaining a product. Explain the problem first.
No, that's really good. I love too that you pointed out that it should be 3 to 5 seconds because that's where people go wrong with elevator pitches. They, I mean, the premise of why it's called an elevator pitch is because it's meant to be conveyed in an elevator by the time you go from the floor you got in on to the next floor up when they might be getting off or you might be getting, off the elevator. And that's like, in most cases, 30 seconds people are thinking. And that's fine in certain environments, like, like our lunch that we do, and we go around and we have like a little bit more time and the spotlight's on you to talk and address people rather than an organic conversation. And people forget in an organic conversation situation, if you're talking at someone for 30 seconds, they're going to be like, yo, leave me alone. Like, why? Shut up already. Like, I don't care. It's too much. But being able to just give them that just enough in 3 to 5 seconds that piques their interest and leaves them with the agency to ask, hey, can you explain more? Can you say, like, I'd love to hear more. Like, that's where the conversation starts to take place. And you're not talking at someone, you're talking with someone. You have a conversation. So I think that's super important. Um, let's jump over to Gabriel asking some great questions over here in Starmada. So Gabriel's asking, I would like to know the best steps to take to reach out to accelerators. So let's start with that part of the question first and then move on to the next one. So what's your advice for that?
Yeah, I'm much more tapped into well, I mean, like speed run and things like that from A16Z. Those accelerators that are kind of overseen by uh, not private equity, but more the VC venture capital space. I think one of the big things when you're reaching out is there are two main aspects of this. People love to see that there's been made progress on something, whether it's a prototype or idea that someone can touch, feel, and understand. So I think if you're able to start building, um, do it, but do it cost effectively, because a lot of founders will start building a product that nobody wants. And it's actually really easy to do that. And it's also real easy to move beyond a MVP kind of style uh, product and start building overly complicated things. I actually realized that a lot of the stuff in my own product that I'm building out for a workspace is things that companies won't actually use, because it makes things more of a source of data truth rather than facilitating what the core company does, which is intelligence. So really think about what you're doing, what you're building, and how you want to build it, because your messaging that you're going to send to an accelerator for acceptance or trying to get into a program or whatever it might be, your application needs to really tackle, and I'm not saying narrow scope in terms of your audience should be small. No, your audience should be massive if you can, of course. But the problem that you're solving, the essence of your product, needs to really hit a grand slam in terms of you understand exactly what problem you're solving, who has this problem, how your solution fixes the problem or facilitates a solution or benefit that no company is currently doing in the same way or as quite a powerful way as what you have. Um, and again, not every company or founder has the funds to start building right away for themselves, and that's what accelerators are often for, is figuring out, okay, what steps do I need to get support to be able to build this out, move forward with it, maybe get a little bit of funding, seed funding, things like that, and really learn what it takes to facilitate and build a startup that you have. So in those cases, I think finding very good co-founders is super important to help with the applications to the accelerators, things like that. Everybody should have their expertise in an area. Um, One, the actual product itself. Two, the actual market and who you're selling to. That's also going to be super important. And when you think about it, it's kind of like that elevator pitch idea. If you're sending an application to an accelerator, make it irresistible. Like somebody has to know more and get to the next stage. So first you'll probably submit an application to an accelerator, then you might have a 30-second to 5-minute interview. There's different things that happen there. And I'd say prepare for them. Make the most powerful pitches, and the same as meeting people in conferences or events or mixers. The whole point is to get another meeting booked. So you have to constantly make the person from the accelerator that's representing their fund or whatever it is to think these people are worth another 5 minutes of my time. Absolutely. Let's book a call right now and get it on the calendar. Obviously, it doesn't always happen that fast, but you also want to leave them with something to think about, that they keep saying, you know what, there's a lot of potential here. And that's why I think having a little demo product or something, or something that really illustrates what you're solving is super important.
Yeah, it's all wonderful, wonderful advice. I want to add on that just a little bit. Two things. One, for accelerators or even venture capitalists, but accelerators especially, they're very clear about their investment thesis, their application process, and what they're looking for, not just in the company, but the team, the founders. So make sure you do the research and learn about that stuff first and apply that to what Craig said in regards to how you present your pitch and what you highlight when you demo your product. And when you demo your product in a pitch deck, I would recommend not using video, but instead storyboard the user flow, the experience. Reference your wireframes or reference using your product if you have an MVP already, right? And I would recommend recording yourself using your product as if you are a fresh customer that just learned about it and you have no idea what's going on. Go through the onboarding process, go through, each step that's required for you to input the necessary data for your software, your product to act upon and provide the promised enjoyable experience and benefits that you're selling to these people, right? And reference that video of that user experience, that first run user experience to highlight what you feel is the most critically important aspects of what Craig pointed out to in regards to this is what you're doing for very specific people in the market, how you're doing it uniquely from others in the market, and where, again, that's providing an enjoyable experience, benefits, and value to them, right? So definitely, like, yeah, leverage that. The other thing, too, to kind of be aware of is regarding this, aspect of matchmaking, and that's built into the investment thesis. And again, a lot of what Craig's talking about with how you tell your story and how you reference the research that you do about the investors of any kind, whether it's an accelerator or VC or someone else, and tell that story in a way that is resonating with them and leaves them with that emotional investment where they feel like, oh wow, like this is really cool. This is something I'm really interested in. This is hitting all the right marks and it's resonating, right? And again, if you're able to demo the product from a human perspective, it makes it so much easier for them to either see themselves using this as a customer themselves and seeing the enjoyment and benefit and value of it, or very easily imagine how people in the market that you're selling this to get that from this. And that also lends itself to another aspect of that potential that Craig mentioned, which is de-risking the deal. You want to de-risk the deal because everyone's saying that they're going to be the next, billion-dollar company, but you got to show them how you're the least risky option for them to put their money into in order to see that return, see those success stories. Like an accelerator might be doing it one part to generate a return, another part to, build up stronger credibility for other investors or maybe government, partnership, something else. Craig, you have anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good, really good advice all around. And kind of like you just mentioned, different accelerators might have different purposes for their accelerators. Some are because they have a venture capital fund that they're pouring money into. Others for A16Z, which Andreessen Horowitz. A lot of people think that their speedrun accelerator is like their thing. It's actually really just advertising for them. When it comes down to it. Their fund is so massive and so big and so profitable for them that the accelerator is something that really gets their brand all over the place at different tech events, at different global events. And um, that doesn't take any credibility or value from the accelerator. It's actually one of the most powerful accelerators out there. I've seen a lot of successful companies go through that. And I know people who have been part of that company as scouts and different things like that. So there's value in it, but it's really good to research and understand what the accelerator's purpose is, and what they're looking for as well. So, like with Andreas and Horowitz, a lot of times they'll concentrate in the gaming industry for their speedrun accelerator or things that are heavily involved with that type of technology. So that's a great if you're building for visual arts, gaming, different things that could be applied to that entertainment sector. It's like that would be a good one don't cut corners on your applications or anything to those. I mean, you shouldn't on any of them, but it's good, kind of like sending out a resume. They say mold your application into what the company is actually looking for, and you want to be flexible enough where your product is what your product should be, your market's going to be what your market should be. You've done your homework on that. But different accelerators that are used to serving different companies will be a better or worse fit depending on that.
Wonderful additions for sure. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, let's keep going with this because Gabriel asked some good follow-ups and I want to touch on. So, first, yeah, Gabriel said, thank you. We're in production and bootstrapped. Is there a forum to determine the best state we're in? This is our first startup. For instance, do we need to go to an accelerator or seed funding, etc.? This can be answered after the next in line. Nope. This is too relevant and on topic still. So we're sticking with it. So yeah, Craig, what's your thoughts on that? Like, determining if this even makes sense, like, to pursue an accelerator or seed funding or another investor, and how would you suggest they determine that path and move forward with that if it seems like it is the correct one?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you this is one of my favorite questions because a lot of times, especially coming from a consultant who went in-house with a company that first thought funding was the right way to go, realized that they can remain bootstrapped and then get acquired. And the best part about that is you're not giving up any equity. I know there's this nostalgia that I'll just come out and say I hate the nostalgia that you have to get funding if you're a startup and you have to get as much as you can and you have to brag about that number, because that's the exact opposite in reality that you want to do. I get investment companies and investors are going to hate me for saying this, but you should try not to get investment for as long as possible while being able to create the most powerful company that you possibly can. And then when you need money to actually grow and hit your goals and milestones that actually make sense, they're not arbitrary. We want $10 million in funding because we saw this other company that's like us that we think's a similar valuation get $10 million. No, that's not a reason to get funding. That's not at all. You don't want other people's money if you don't need other people's money. You want other people's money when you need it for a very specific purpose to grow, and it might be multiple purposes. But I'll just come out and say that's my view on funding, is that don't do it unless you have to do it. And unless it's an actual strategic purpose to scale, grow, move fast, do things that you couldn't do without money. As a consultant, a lot of things that I'll start with what I view as a consultant, and then I'll describe a little bit about my experience with SyncSketch and why things kind of change with the outlook of funding versus remaining bootstrapped. And there's very specific things that led to that transformation. But as a consultant, one of the biggest things I hear when I ask, like, well, what are you looking for funding for? A lot of people say, well, we want to market our product. We have an MVP and we want to put it all into marketing. And there's two red flags that come up when I hear funding for marketing. One is your product not good enough that you need to shovel millions of dollars into marketing versus organic growth or account-based marketing where you're targeting a few very specific companies who would be high value for using your product and you having as a customer. There's different things to look at before just shoveling money into marketing. The second question I usually ask, other than is your product not good enough that you just need to create a giant marketing money spending pit, or the other question is, do you fully understand who your customer is and who you're marketing to? Because you should not spend $1 on marketing if you do not have a really good sense of who's going to be your biggest buyer, how they're going to be buying it, exactly what their problems are and what you're solving, how you're going to improve solving their problems over time, how they're currently buying products to solve this problem, you need to know everything about your customer. And that's really um, when people talk about ICPs, ideal customer profiles, the customer journey map. So how they interact with products and their entire journey across interacting with yours. All that stuff should be figured out before spending $1 on marketing. And I think the big thing now, there's a difference between marketing and A/B testing features and things like that. If you're getting feedback and you're going out there to get feedback, do that. Spend money on that too. Like if you can, it's always worth spending money to get feedback because it's going to help you build a better product and a better company. I would say do that before you start shoveling money into marketing, because marketing will be more expensive than reaching out to people and getting feedback from them. But so with that, my experience with SyncSketch was that they had a super great product initially and a business model that was not set up to make a lot of money. And when you transform that into, okay, your main customer is who? It's universities, education. So schools were using this collaborative app, professors to grade their students' work, to help them design things remotely and collaboratively and things like that. Specifically animation schools and schools that were in design. Now, when you have a really powerful product that everybody boasts about and can go viral and is going viral in one sector, you have to look at it and say, what is the future of our business and how do we want to get there? Do we want to move to the studio system? How much value is there in large studios? Are large studios using us and we don't even know about it? Um, so that's all metrics as a company that you want to gather and look at and see what potentially you have to either do a pivot or a particular thing to see if you're a B2B kind of application or a B2C application. So by that, I mean business to consumer, business to business. Uh, so for SyncSketch, one of the big things was, yes, this is a great app for the studio system. COVID had just happening. So there was an actual external catalyst that forced people to begin using more collaborative applications. So it was this now or never moment where if you're going to get into the studio system, and let me also preface this by saying SyncSketch was not a in a blue ocean. It wasn't the only app doing remote collaboration. It was actually a red ocean where there were 10, 15 other competitors out there doing very similar things, didn't have as user friendly as an application and didn't have the tools that real animators really wanted to use. They were more geared towards like marketing agencies and things like that. So after we took a look, I went in and did basically like a account based marketing exercise where let's look at some major studios. I know like different people in the company had connections and were trying to close deals, but they weren't fully enterprise ready. So you kind of have to do a review of your company and say, what does it take to sell into an enterprise? Because we know there's value in our product there. So you do a review and say, do we need better legal documents and review process? Do we need better security features on the app because no one will use us without certain security protocol? That's when it becomes both bureaucratic, logistical, technical, not necessarily just the value of the application, but the value of the onboarding experience and requirements of your customer who will be more valuable. Now, transitioning to that in the studio system, the amount that studios will pay for the benefit of this application was massive. So it's literally 10 times per user what the education system would pay. So when you look at that, you get a much bigger view of what does our revenue situation look like? What do our contract sizes look like with our customers now? So instead of contracts, when you're looking at something, let's say I'm just going to throw a number out there, instead of $5,000 per client, you're looking at $50,000 per client. That's a big difference. And one of those, you can start hiring people, you can start marketing, you can start doing a lot of things yourselves. If you get a multi-year contract up front and you can get, let's say, $250,000 from one client, then you have a lot more that you can start doing much more quickly. And that can transform whether a company needs funding versus whether they can remain bootstrap. And it also determines in that situation uh, what the trajectory looks like of your customer, your market. And that is what people mean when I talk about technical founders and I talk about um, the business driven founders. What I'm describing right now is a business model. I didn't mention product, I think, once in that whole thing. And that's what, when you're looking at funding, yes, the product's great. And investors love product led businesses because the person building the product, if they have also experienced the problem that they're solving directly, that's a very powerful combination. You're solving a problem that you had with a way that you believe works, and it's been tested at least by one person that experienced that problem. That's huge. So I don't want to take away from the technical side and the founder-led side of that aspect, but the what I just described is why the business side is so important. And that will, how you form your business model, determine whether you do need funding or not. Of course, if you're building rocket ships, you'll probably need funding no matter what. So I do want to preface with, like, there are companies and models and things, and it's about looking at reality, like realistically, what is actually going to drive your company and be able to move the needle on what you're doing. So whether you need an accelerator or not really depends on what you're trying to do as your kind of like your roadmap for milestones. If you're trying to get the foundation to be able to build an MVP that you can launch to market, and you aren't quite sure where or how to do that with you and your current co-founders or whatever, then an accelerator might be the way to go. If it's just you running your company and you feel like you're not getting momentum forward, or you're not quite sure what direction to take it, it might be that you actually need to team up with a co-founder rather than jump into an accelerator first right away, because there might be uh, components or elements missing in your own development of the company that bringing someone else in can drastically move the needle on as well. So I know that's a lot about that, but I love that question. And I have a different take because everyone's like, yeah, funding, we got so much funding. And I'm like, you lost a big chunk of your company doing that. So it's always, yeah.
No, that was incredible, and I agree that people need to hear that far more often because yeah, like TechCrunch and a lot of these other just sources of bad information, like a lot of information that is very romanticized and sensationalized is put out there, and it feeds into the vulnerabilities of overeager, ambitious entrepreneurs of all kinds. It doesn't matter if you're doing a tech startup or you want to, like, start a restaurant or something else. It's so much of that, and also all these grifters, and we talk about this often. Like, there's so many people that are just trying to grift other people online, and then there's also, again, the other people that we talk about that have made mistakes, and rather than learn and admit that they were wrong and feel that vulnerability or feel stupid as a result of that, and recognize that they did the best at the time based on what they knew, and instead of learning and developing wisdom, they try to force other people to make the same mistakes to justify their, like, essentially their boneheadedness, and perpetuate that. So there's a whole bunch of bad sources of you just gotta go all in, you gotta raise as much money as you can right now, you need to have an investor. Like, yeah, I appreciate you pushing back on that and being another voice that's like, no, build a real business. Figure out how to build a real business. And I posted something in the chats. There's a template for a lean model canvas, and this is beneficial for a number of reasons. If you haven't done this before for your business, it's really like the starting point for the business model and your business strategies and plans that you're going to develop. And it's also a tool that you can leverage for how you're going to pitch to investors, how you're going to pitch to your customers on your landing page or in person. So I'd recommend using that tool. There's a number of varieties, and look into that. But another thing too, Gabriel, that you're asking about, so you had like another question regarding, do you have any good books or PDFs with the process I can add to my documentation or with this process? In regards to yeah, fundraising, pitching, and just, following them up again on Craig, your wonderful, highlighting of putting together a business model. Yeah, again, the lean model canvas is a great starting point. Learn lean methodology as well, because this touches a lot of what Craig you were talking about in regards to, you have grand ideas and ambitions, but where do you start today? Given your limited understanding, expertise, experience, relationships, insights, resources of all sorts, and time, right? All these things are critically important factors that are unique to each of you, each of us. And if you're not taking the time to properly contextualize those things, it's going to be very difficult for you to know how to move forward in an effective way, especially in a way that's not creating undue risk and making unnecessary sacrifices. And that's where a lot of those mistakes are, where people are rushing ahead and going too fast and buying into a lot of these toxic practices that people put out there. So yeah, lean methodology is wonderful for that, to identify all those different factors and focus on the next step that is going to move you forward as quickly as possible with the least amount of risk, given what you have to work with, right? And another thing, and I'm curious, I'll follow up on with a question for you, Craig, about this, is implementing a project management framework. I don't care what kind, any kind's good. Agile, Scrum is like super popular. Kanban, my favorite super simplified version of Scrum from another mentor that I promote often, Mike Williams. He designed this thing called Doing to Done. I'll post the links to that too. It just it's very rooted in Scrum, but also best practices for human psychology of just like celebrating and feeling good and gratitudes and reflecting on your accomplishments. So you don't get burned out. You have that motivation. So Craig, on that note, I'm curious, when you're project managing, either as a founder or an employee or any other aspect in your life, what's your process? What's your methodology for that? What system do you use, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I'm PMP certified and I have my MBA and all that stuff. So there's so many different frameworks that go into uh, the education of that. And I kind of pull from what the situation actually needs. My brain's kind of designed to uh, think about juxtaposition of milestones and the events that happen to get to them. So typically what I'll look at is here's the main vision or goal. Like for me, very recently I went from, okay, I am starting my business as delivering assets, intelligence assets that we create as a professional service, because I know that I can do right now. So I design the system of what does that look like from beginning to end to be able to deliver that to clients consistently and then automate it as much as possible. And that's when I start bringing in frameworks of first looking at the customer journey and also how the product itself accelerates and delivers the value within that journey. And then I prioritize. This is where I actually really suck at developing my own. The prioritization, I will start creating lists, and there's different ways to prioritize different tasks. You have like Eisenhower matrix and other things there. But you want to order things in a way where, and this is from typical project management stuff, you look at the critical path and it helps you figure out what to do in what order to make sure that you're not putting blockers in front of yourself. You're hitting all the things in the right order so that you're doing it in the least amount of time because you know where all the dependencies are in what you're building. And then of course, beyond that, there's resourcing. What resources do you need to dump in where? Uh, and that's not just money or let's say, applications that you're bringing in to be able to facilitate the different things you're doing, but also people as well. So you have that workforce kind of aspect. And I don't mean you have to have a huge workforce. It could be your co-founders, how you're dividing up the work, how you're planning that. And there's different tools to make order of all of that. I think the other important thing beyond the actual frameworks, like what I'm looking at now with my company, is I want to build a prototype, and I have the prototype now, to have the full service automated as much as humanly possible, but also so that it transforms the customer experience to be able to get the absolute max value that this service and product can actually deliver to them. So in building the prototype for this, I mean, I did a lot of, okay, I'm going to learn how to use Claude Code so I can build as much of this myself as possible, and then bring in real developers and real people to be able to check the things and see the unknowns that I don't know, and really develop the strongest product possible. And with obviously using AI to help code applications, there's positives and negatives to that. One is that you can build something tangible and real, and that works. The other side of it is that AI tends to leave a lot of holes and gaps in certain areas that real DevOps teams will catch and can fix and debug, and um, kind of up the integrity of everything across the board. So, in looking at that, there's a couple processes in organizing what that looks like. I'd say for myself, it's been very chaotic, but fast at the same time. It's one of those, like what Facebook came up with when they were first there, um, move fast and break things. So it's like just build, forget like the having absolute pristine integrity. We'll figure out how to break it and then fix it from there. And as a smaller startup, that is a very powerful way to move forward. It has its limitations though, so you kind of got to figure out where things are breaking and what the actual impact is, both on your company and to your customers and the world. So it's a really interesting, fun experience. But I'd say one thing that I do want to stress, because like I said, I have the PMP, MBA, all that stuff that teaches tons of too many project management frameworks, I feel like, but they're all great to know. But don't get hung up on them. Don't let them uh, damage creativity. Don't let them hinder your ability to move fast. Don't let them block you from reaching a milestone. And there's different levels of negative consequences for leaving project management frameworks, just like there is for certain legal things. I'll tell you, when GDPR for privacy, consumer privacy, popped up in the UK, and software applications had to follow these crazy GDPR things that were very tough to do at the time. The question is, like, do you spend time away from building out your product to get compliant with a law like this? And at the time when GDPR first came out, there's a yes and no answer. Like, yeah, companies could be fined a tremendous amount of money for not following GDPR. At the same time, startups couldn't meet those requirements. It was literally almost impossible. Um, and sometimes it was impossible depending on what the actual applications are. Same thing for being in the education sector, and selling to schools with the other companies I've experienced. They have they call it WACG compliance, which is everything from like certain disabilities interacting with a web application, or I should say people with certain disabilities, to ease of use, things like that, so that people who um, weren't able to use software as easily as other people had something there, some kind of features that could work and assist them. And one of those questions is, especially for a design application, how far do you go to say you meet these requirements or don't? And one of the questions is like legally, you talk to an attorney and say, what is the actual risk here? And I can tell you some attorneys during the initial GDPR kind of stuff was, um, don't worry about it right now. The government doesn't even know what's going on with that stuff yet. So like the risk is pretty minimal. It's a real thing. It's a real law, but don't worry about it yet because it's evolving. And then they started pushing the goalpost on like, okay, you don't need to meet GDPR requirements yet. Or you should, but you won't necessarily get into legal trouble. And there's all this vague, unclear cloudiness around a lot of this stuff. So don't get hung up on things that are going to collapse your growth entirely. I mean, if you're doing something that's unethical, yeah, don't do that. There's obviously limitations to saying ignore this or move forward with that, or don't let this slow you down. And sometimes project management frameworks act in a similar way, where like if you abide by a system or management style specifically without flexibility, it's going to slow you down somewhere. So just remember that you're building a living, breathing thing when you're building a business where, at least in the sense that it's constantly evolving, it's constantly growing, it's going to hit downturns, it's going to hit upturns. There's going to be internal things that are very tough to deal with. There's going to be external things, some things foreseeable, some things not foreseeable. And you got to be flexible enough, but also adaptable enough to um, to understand it. And in that vein, I kind of say there's companies when risky things are happening or there are things that are hindering the growth of a company, you can either like roll over and give up as a company and say, you know what, society's just not going to use this product, or this event made our product irrelevant. The other thing is that you can adapt and actually build your product to change and be able to survive the kind of headwinds that your company faces. And the other thing you can do is thrive. Literally take all the adversity and challenges that are laying before your company and figure out how to transform the company so that not only do those challenges not knock you off your feet, but you use those challenges, you transform them into opportunities, and you actually grow bigger, better, and stronger in the long run because you were flexible enough to be able to understand the reality of the way the world's operating.
Yeah, there's so much good insights there. Um, I think the call out to really focus in on is flexibility. And if you want to be successful, again, in any aspect of life, you want to have a fulfilling life. Being flexible is like a superpower by far. And you know, it's an understanding that there are things out of your control, and you need to be careful with the expectations you set and hold on to those expectations, the way you hold on to those expectations, for good or bad. And the more flexible you are, the more you'll go with the flow, the more you'll find yourself identifying those moments in life that are enjoyable, that are interesting, that are helping you develop character and growth and wisdom from it all. And the same applies to like, how you grow in a career, how you grow a business, right? And the other thing that's really wonderful about that mentality and approach to things is how much value you can bring to investors, especially because they're looking for founders and teams that are flexible, that are able to meet the challenges, overcome them, and not get stuck like, with adversity. They have a way to move around, move through under whatever it is, or pivot, right? Like, if this isn't working, it's not the right product, it's not right market or something else. But we learned so much from these series of experiments that we've been running that we have a new concept, a new hypothesis, and we're going to test that out. And it worked out. Now we're focusing on this and we're moving forward, right? And the same again applies to how you apply project management. And the nice thing about learning like a couple different ones is again, like I really enjoy doing to Dawn because it has cobbled together a couple different systems and simplified a lot of it. And in my own way, before, meeting Mike and getting in like, like introduced to what he's like designed, I was, yeah, mixing some different stuff together from Scrum, from, I don't know, just random things I've picked up, even like more like traditional kind of waterfall like management from way back in the day, because I'm older too. And it just became like my own type of system. But I have ADHD and I tend to overthink things and complicate some things. And so, yeah, finding like another way to doing it that simplified things helped out a lot. And I think the other thing too that's really great, what Craig said is you definitely don't want to take risks without consulting or hiring the right people, like a lawyer. One of the main reasons for doing that is so you always have a another party you can hold accountable to the decisions you made and be like, that was the advice that we got, right? And you're not just winging it. You're not using AI to just like, tell you what you want to hear, be like, oh yeah, go take this risk, right? You want to be careful and find that balance because the other thing again about finding investors, being successful as a business operator, even without investors, is learning how to assess and manage risk appropriately and move forward the right way. We got a couple final questions here, Craig. So Slayer Darth over on Twitch asks, Craig and Gary, when I'm watching channels like CNBC and Bloomberg, they talk about GAAP and non-GAAP numbers. I'm from the UK, but aware of what GAAP is. Obviously, for public companies, they must use GAAP reporting, but they're also allowed to include non-GAAP numbers for further context. Does this mean non-GAAP is more for investors and GAAP is just there to appease the accountants' auditors? I don't know how well versed you are with this, Craig, but if you are, feel free to share an opinion.
Yeah. Oh no, I dealt with this a lot, especially during the acquisition where you need to display your finances in a way that is gap compliant. For anyone who doesn't know, that's generally accepted accounting principles, I believe. So that is kind of the blanket for having an accounting standard. And the reason why that came about is because in business, it was realized that there are different business models, and different business models or ways of operating started reporting figures differently based on everything from when they recognized revenue. So, like, let's say I put a contract together with a client for $100,000 a year. Do I recognize that $100,000 when they pay me $100,000 all in the same quarter or the same day? Or do I recognize that $100,000 spread over the course of a year? And in GAAP, it's going to be spread over when the services are actually delivered. So, there, as you can see just from that one example, which is just one of probably a ton of different things going on, that there's different ways that somebody can report something or manipulate numbers. And I don't want to say manipulate necessarily in a negative way, but numbers for accounting, metrics for business health, different things like that are transformed and manipulated in ways where people can get use out of them. So whether it's understanding the health of a company or understanding what the company's cash flow is or what their revenue is, and like even something as simple as revenue is different than cash flow. Revenue means that $100,000 deal is um, is paid within that year or recognized over the course of a year. Cash flow might be, hey, we have $100,000 in cash right now, and we can use this for operations or whatever, and then that becomes another way to report things. So that's why GAAP was created. Now, for companies that report both GAAP and non-GAAP, the gap is the accounting way. It's like, this is what we have to report because we are a public company, and we have to structure things for the SEC so that they understand the reality of our finances, the way they want to or the way they have to for actual legal purposes. The non-GAAP reporting is so that investors can actually, and even the company itself, can actually understand the metrics that they find valuable and useful for them. So, with gap reporting, like, contracts can't be recognized at certain times when they're not finalized or paid at certain times, or maybe they a company defaults on their payment, and that's all handled a certain way in gap. But you have to look at, if you're actually measuring the health of a company, what does that mean in terms of the metrics that I care about? What does that mean in terms um, of taking those metrics and values that are of financial nature and putting them in something um, like deal size. Deal size isn't a gap measure, but if I'm looking at that $100,000 a year contract and I want to say in this quarter we had X number of $100,000 contracts, the SEC is not going to care about that. That's not how things are reported to them. For the company, when they're looking at contract value per quarter and different things like that, they might report that as, we have X number of revenue that was generated through contracts per this quarter. And that's, I wouldn't even say that translates necessarily directly from GAAP. That's more just health metrics and things like that. But it's a similar, very similar thing with how companies convey revenue recognition is probably the biggest and most important one, because those are numbers that are reported publicly the most. The other is, especially when it comes to software companies or companies that are, I'd say, less SaaS, but more usage based now, is becoming bigger, especially with tokenization for AI models and things like that, where um, it's a little tougher to predict necessarily what the actual final usage metric is going to be, because it's based on usage. So companies might convey um, financial projections based on past, current, evolving numbers there, or deals that are modeled in, where a company may be um, applying usage against a contract that they have. And like, how do you report that usage versus the contract? Like, that's not a gap figure, but companies might use that for their reporting to show, like, yeah, a company used 80% of their contract within the first 6 months of using our product. And like, that's a way you can report the health of a company. So, long story short, one is for compliance, the gap, the SEC for, and they call it generally accepted, because there are situations um, where there's that flexibility to have non-gap kind of come in and be the more valuable figure for certain things.
Right on. That was really cool. Yeah, I'm glad, like, yeah, a few people were happy to hear some insight from that. And then also, the follow-up question, and I think we'll have this be the final one, Craig, if you got time for it.
Yeah, yeah, I have another 20 minutes or so.
Okay. All right, cool. So yeah, Slayer Darth had a follow-up question. I get confused when companies talk about their order books. It seems like aging orders is a KPI companies track internally to see which ones remain unfulfilled. How often should they check in with customers to ensure those orders are still confirmed? That's a really good question.
Yeah. Um, so there are, especially when you're dealing with your sales teams or your biz dev teams, and are looking at orders coming in, uh, when the contract deal is going to be signed for those orders, and then uh, when payment for that contract is actually going to come in, and then also usage of that contract. Like I said, if it's usage based, like how does a company actually fulfill the contract value that's there? So that entire pipeline is super important to look at, and it's super important to keep tabs on. So they might talk about pipeline acceleration for um, for business development and sales, and customer success may or may not be a part of that depending on what they're doing. But the important thing to look at, especially when it comes to how frequently you're approaching customers or talking to customers about their orders and getting those filled and things like that. I'd say part of it depends on your business model and what your company is selling. So there are uh, businesses like small software applications where orders can happen as soon as you get off the phone with somebody, and you could get a contract in place pretty quickly and get that stuff going. The other is um, if companies are you're selling a very complicated product, it might take 6 months to a year to close an actual full client. Hopefully not a year. I'd say 6 months is not unreasonable for a massive company spend. So you have to look at that cycle. And during that 6 months, how frequently you're moving the needle forward will depend on how fast you're able to handle that kind of enterprise readiness that I was talking about, with how fast does legal move? How fast does um, if they have a security team evaluating a product, how fast does all that stuff move? And the faster you can move all that and talk to your decision makers, the quicker and more, I'd say, less friction there's going to be during that order fulfillment process. Um, if that makes sense, I guess. I hope I'm answering the question uh, that was actually asked.
I think so. Felt on topic. Slayer can provide any follow-ups if they got them. But yeah, um, well, yeah, we wait for Slayer to perhaps like yeah add any little bits for a quick little roundup. Since we are coming up on time, Craig, do you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to share with the community, announcements or anything like that? Good time for that.
Uh, whew, I'd say and I'm always excited to hear questions and learn about companies and people and where they're at and what they're doing and their challenges or even their success stories. I do have to say one thing that I want to hear more about from the community are success stories and wins as well. Because a lot of people, I do, and I say it very frequently that I love hearing about people's problems. Not because I like that people have problems, but I feel like when people talk about their problems, even them expressing them allows things to click a little bit. And I think communicating issues and having a support system there that helps people get over them is super important. But I think the big thing uh, also is to celebrate the wins, celebrate the milestones you hit, and share those. And I'd love to hear about them. So feel free to DM me on LinkedIn and say, hey, my company just did this. And then also, if you have challenges or things going on, I'm always open. Send me questions, or just if you need to spew out some kind of challenge that you're having and are trying to figure out how to turn things around or get some feedback, share it with people. Obviously, certain sensitive things, share it with people you trust. Don't just start putting your personal checkbook online and things like that with your business. But yeah, I'd say don't be afraid to communicate. We're all human. We're all here to share, help each other out, support each other. So make sure you have that support system. I think that system is the thing that determines how fast a company is going to grow and how successful they're going to grow, is being able to get the right feedback, the right support system, and use that to empower you to build something bigger and better every day.
I love that. I love that. It's a wonderful note to end on. Yeah, just people, be good human beings, be part of your community, contribute. Definitely. Yeah. Sharad said I was late on this one, but great last words, Craig. So yeah, yeah, I always love the emphasis on human connection, community, especially with you and a lot of the other mentors that we bring in. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And it's not a difficult thing. It feels difficult, I know. Pushing through discomfort, feeling, vulnerable is a very powerful thing. But just put yourself out there. Go hang out. Join teams, join hobbies, participate in hobbies, take some classes. Just be a part of the community, go to events, do anything you can to just be around other human beings and yeah, you'll warm up. You'll find your way and don't be so obsessed of only focusing on work or your career and making all your attention and talking points about that. Be a well-rounded person, and it gets so much easier. So yeah, thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. I want to absolutely thank Gabriel and Slayer for being very, very, again, brave to ask the questions for a very shy group today. But yeah, thank you for leading by example and showing people the value in asking questions and learning together. Yeah, with that said, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the week and a great weekend coming up. Craig, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, all right,
Awesome.
cool.
All right.
All
Catch
right,
everyone soon. And I saw Slayer Darth. I mean, I can answer that real fast if
do
you
it, do
want.
it, do it.
Okay. So yeah, communication with the customer needs to be kind of like expectation based, right? So if a customer kind of fizzles out and you're not sure if they still want an order or not, the idea is to get in front of that earlier before the communication fizzles out. So you need to have a system in place, and typically that's why it's really important to get good sales experts or customer success teams in there. The whole point of a customer success team is that they're regularly checking in and understanding the company's journey, the client's journey. And I think that's important is from the beginning of the sales process, be on the buyer journey with them, but as a partner. Don't make it seem like you're just selling them something and then you ghost them after they put in an order. What you really want to do is be with them on the journey, but not just to that point where the contract signed. You want to be with them on the journey to make sure that they're actually getting the value that you're promising them and that they expect out of your product. And that should be built upon clear, transparent communication throughout the entire process. So the frequency that happens with, again, depends on the business model. So that's why I say get the person to look at the pipeline, look at the business, and make sure that the communication between your company and the customer is clear enough and that they're excited enough to use the product so that you don't have that gap with order fulfillment.
What a sneaky, wonderful bonus answer we got right there for calling it. And again, it's touching on the theme of community. You want to build a community around your brand, around your product, your service, your company, you. And yeah, that's how you do it. So thank you, Craig. Thank you again. We'll see you next month, maybe sooner. Who knows? I know you like doing this a lot. Thank you, everyone. Again, take care. All right, I'm gonna close it down now.